G'day guys and gal. When the Legions broke up harder than YouTube breaks its content creators' balls, various Space Marine chapters were created, some of which would go on to outshine their original Legion, such as the Black Templars. Most of these new chapters were created from Ultramarine stock, however each Loyalist Legion, and apparently a few Traitor Legions, had their own successors, other than the Space Wolves. Even the Salamanders, who are on the brink of extinction, had successors at some point, such as the Black Dragons. But what about the White Scars? Can you name a single White Scar successor chapter? Genuinely, why don't the White Scars seem to have any successors, and if they do, who are they and why has pretty much nobody heard of them? Before we get started, I'm so fucking happy to announce that the weekly Major Mini releases are back in action and will be so for the rest of the year. Today we're launching two brand new minis, the Lord of Lament, a hero character decked out in yellow, for those we cherish we die in glory, as well as the Dark Hunter, an extremely badass model created based off this art that I had made in conjunction with others. Both would make incredible, unique and awesome HQ units for your army. The Dark Hunter especially could make an epic Son of Jagadai, or perhaps an Executioner of Russ, or for the one or two of you that actually paint the Dark Hunters, there you go. Both models are available right now for worldwide shipping. Shipping is free for orders over $150, so if you see something else you like, then you can bundle them together. We also offer a pre-painted service where you can get the models you like, in the paint scheme you like, at the quality tier you like, without lifting a finger. Not to mention we're still running our $21,500 Major Mini painting competition, so if you want to earn bulk cash and are a good painter or know a good painter, then check it out. We recently moved into a way bigger warehouse for Major Minis. I'm going to be sending this brand to the moon this year and releasing some incredible stuff. We've created and sent out nearly 100,000 miniatures, and we have an almost perfect score across not just our own reviews, but on Etsy as well. We even use our own god tier custom formulated resin that you can't get anywhere else, which is universally praised. Link is below. Today we'll go over why the White Scars don't seem to have any successor chapters, and if they do, then who the fuck are they? Let's get into it. The White Scars were actually very similar to the Space Wolves in a lot of ways. Jagoras was more than just a homeworld, it contained the core of their beliefs, culture and even spirit. When the Librarians were outlawed, the Space Wolves kept their Rune Priests and the White Scars kept their Stormseers. Now this might seem hypocritical, especially from the Space Wolves, however the way both Legion Librarians went about the warp ensured they were safe from it. They did not dive deep, just skimmed the surface and took their fill, nothing more. They also bound their warp use with their worlds, channeling through them, which added more protection since the warp is all about symbolism and shit. Basically what I'm getting at is that any successor chapter that would have had to leave Fenris or Jagoras would automatically just be seen as a Timu version of their parent chapter and would be forced to reinvent themselves. Now unlike the Space Wolves, who were unable to create any successors due to Magnus being a fucking nerd, the White Scars did create a number of them, at least 4 when the heresy ended, indicating they had about 5,000 still living White Scars at the end of the heresy, which does sound about right. These were the Destroyers, a chapter of extremely ferocious Marines, makes sense, the Marauders, who look like Imperial Fists and fight like Raven Guard, they prefer to fight alone and are masters of range warfare, preferring to ambush and kill their enemy from afar. Then there is the Rampagers, a chapter that looks like the Blood Angels and still partake in their own version of the White Scars cutting themselves to create a scar, however they take it a step further, with future scars being added to represent rank and prestige. They also exclusively recruit from feral worlds, which seems to make up their name. Then there is the Stormlords, the most White Scar-like of the successors, who regularly compete with their parent chapter to try prove dominance. They are known to be exceptional at hating and slaying orcs. Now you've probably noticed that a lot of the White Scar successors have extremely brutal names, whilst 2 of them took the direct colouring of the Imperial Fists and the Blood Angels, which were the 2 legions the White Scars fought alongside on Terra. This isn't a coincidence. The White Scars were extremely vengeful and traumatized after the siege. Jagadai literally died and they felt his death, putting them in a berserk rampage, which made even the Death Guard shit themselves. I mean, they always shit themselves, but you know what I mean. Likewise, Jagadai was one of the Primarchs who wanted to strike out and hunt down the escaping traitors, so most White Scars would have wanted to take vicious and violent names for their new chapters to represent how they felt at the time. Likewise, the 3 legions who fought on Terra created an insanely close trauma bond. So to honor the Blood Angels and Imperial Fists, 2 of the new chapters took on their colors. Now this is pretty cool lore, even if none of their second founding chapters have any real lore to go alongside it. So why don't people know about it? Well, I kinda blame GW. The White Scars of 40k are heavily neglected, both in lore and the tabletop. When people love the White Scars, it's because of the Horus Heresy and their role in it. In the current setting, they only have 2 unique models, one of which was only released a few months ago. Likewise, not many people play the White Scars due to white being a difficult color for newbies to work with, as well as the freehand required to paint the red lightning on them. So if the White Scars are already not an attractive option, their successor chapters are even less so, especially since 2 of them have the exact same color scheme as way more popular chapters. Like imagine you get an amazing Blood Angel technique ready to go, but instead of buying any of the awesome Blood Angel models or reading about any of their awesome lore, you instead buy a generic Space Marine army, paint them in those colors and then call them the Rampagers. You'd actually have to be kind of retarded to do that, to be honest. But what about future successor chapters? Did the White Scars create any more, and if so, were they cool. Well, yes, and you may actually know a few of these, even if you didn't actually know they were White Scar successors. The Mantis Warriors are White Scar successors. You know, that chapter that went traitor during the Bad Dab War and then got fucking pulverized by the space sharks. Like the dude in this infamous artwork about to get licked is a Mantis Warrior. All they are really known for is getting fucked on though, so there you go. The Dark Hunters, wink wink, are also a White Scar successor chapter who have been a bit more involved. Known for never speaking or making noise in battle, they are terrifying to fight. In their very first campaign as a chapter, they had to fight a demonic warlord titan and a warpsmith, so needless to say they fucking hate ChatGPT and don't really trust the Mechanicus much. Beyond that, they have an exemplary record and are an S-tier loyalist chapter. However, beyond these two, the rest of the successors, which includes the Wrath Host, the Solar Hawks, the Iron Talons, and the Jade Scorpions, have literally zero lore. Most of them were mentioned once offhand in like a White Dwarf magazine or something, or as a background chapter in a conflict. Funnily enough, there is one more unconfirmed White Scar successor called the Sons of Jagadai. Like, why the fuck are they unconfirmed? It would be like a chapter with unconfirmed origins being called Gooners for Gilliman. There has also been two new Primaris only chapters founded since Gilliman's return, that being the Astral Bears, who don't even have a known fucking insignia, as well as the Storm Reapers, who do have a bit more lore, a decent symbol, and a genuine scheme, but are still a very background off the page sort of chapter. So out of all the successors I've just listed, they have fuck all lore, with the only one that seems remotely interesting being the Dark Hunters, which then goes on to explain why the White Scars don't seem to have any genuine successors. The crazy part is that the White Scars weren't even amongst the Shattered Legions, which are the legions who have a solid excuse for having next to no successors, but even the Shattered Legions have successors that are more well known. The Iron Hands have the Red Talons, the Salamanders have the Black Dragons, the Raven Guard have the Space Sharks. I mean fuck, even the Space Wolves, who only recently got their first genuine successor chapter, the Wolf Spears, have a successor with more decently fleshed out lore. Now I get it, it's not really anyone's fault. The White Scars don't sell well for the reasons I mentioned. I mean damn, the Dragon Warrior from Major Minis is one of our worst selling minis, despite it being, in my opinion, easily one of the coolest sculpts I've ever produced. GW is obviously going to focus the lore and mini releases on stuff like Ultramarines that do sell exceedingly well. It is a bit of a shame though, like once you know how to paint, working with fully white models can actually be a lot of fun and honestly quite fast when you've locked in a technique, but giving a newbie a pot of white paint, especially Citadel white, which is known to be trash, and a model, they would just kill themselves after like 5 minutes. However, GW also need to recognize that although cool models and cool color schemes do sell models, the lore is the main driving factor. There are so many Space Shark armies, third-party models, and hype around the sharks, despite them only having one unique, extremely outdated, and pretty shit model that you can't even buy anymore, and they also have an objectively boring as fuck paint scheme. However, because their lore is so cool, with them even having their own novels, people are deadass buying basic intercessors and happily painting them as sharks, then maybe picking up a Shark Daddy from Major Minis, hehe. But if there is no lore dumped into any of these guys, at least interesting lore, then it's not particularly enticing to spend money on them. Case in point, the White Scars Horus Heresy lore is extremely sick. It made me a huge fan of them, and as such they have a pretty fat roster of models for Horus Heresy, multiple HQ units, specialized units, upgrade packs, and even vehicles. They even have more unique Horus Heresy models than the Ultramarines do. So there you go, good lore equals more sales. GW, you know what to do. Make the Dark Hunters really cool, but don't release their chapter master, hehe. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up a Dark Hunter or a Lord of Lament or literally any other major mini for that matter. Hit the subscribe button, hit the real subscribe button for more neglected content. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.